And now we go to Vienna virtually, and I call Angela Djuric of the Urban Innovation Vienna. Angela, are you with us? Yes, very good.
Yes, can you hear me? Can you see my presentation?
I can see and I can hear you. Thank you.
Perfect. Very good. Okay, then I'll start right now. Thank you for having me. I am here to represent my colleague Dominic Weiss, who unfortunately couldn't make it. But I'm sure I'll try to be as good as he is. So I work at Urban Innovation Vienna. I've studied communications management and sustainable resource management. And I've worked for the city of Vienna or for companies of the city of Vienna for almost 10 years now, mostly in communication. And now since March, I am at Urban Innovation Vienna. Yes, this is the next slide. So Urban Innovation Vienna, you introduced us earlier. We are an urban think tank and we are an in-house innovation agency of Vienna. So we are a subsidiary of Wien Holding, which is a company of Vienna. And we do a lot of advice and consultancy work also with other cities and work in process and stakeholder management and do a lot of governance work as well. And this is my topic of expertise is smart city governance, and this is what I'm going to talk about today. I'm sure you all know Vienna as the capital of Austria, but I want to give you a short overview of Vienna and the conditions Vienna has, because when you want to implement a smart city strategy, you always have to use a local approach. So it's very important to know with what you are working with, because it's not possible to take the Viennese strategy or the strategy of Amsterdam or Rotterdam and just force it onto another city, because every city is different and you have to build upon the strengths of a city, and this is why you have to analyze the city and know what your conditions and your framework and your specifics are. And this is why I want to show you some of the specifics of Vienna first before I talk about the smart city approach of Vienna. So Vienna has 1 million inhabitants, and it is a city, the capital of Austria, and also a state. And we are surrounded by Lower Austria. This is why our boundaries are pretty strict, and we don't talk about the metropolitan area of Vienna, but only of the city of Vienna. And what's important here in Vienna, because it's an old city and it's grown a lot, is that we have a lot of mixed-use quarters. So it is important also for the quality of life here that you can live, work, and use your free time within a certain area, and you don't have to travel a lot to get to a green space, for example, or get to your work. We focus on these short distances, and also when we create new urban development areas, we always try to have these mixed-use quarters everywhere. So as I already say, people don't have to travel, they can work and live in the same neighborhood, so to say. It's also important that in Vienna, every inhabitant uses about 100 square meters, not only in his housing, but also streets. So a city itself is a sustainable way of living, because the land consumption per inhabitant is much lower than when you live in a rural area, for example, and live in a house and you need a lot more streets, for example. So living in the city itself is more sustainable than living on the countryside, and this is why Vienna tries to focus, and as we grow and grow, we want to become more sustainable as well. Important in this mixed-use quarters is also that Vienna has a lot of green space, and this green space is actually stayed by a municipal council resolution from 1904. So Vienna, it consists of 50% green space, parks, as well as urban agriculture, for example, or viniculture. We also grow wine here in our city and like to drink it too. And yes, this is important to have this balance, and it also came in handy with the COVID pandemic, because people in all neighborhoods had at least one park they could go to by foot and didn't have to travel by car, for example, or use public transportation, which was hard anyway in the pandemic. a very important part of Vienna's specifics is that the city owns its infrastructure. So the city of Vienna actually owns the sewers, for example, or the water and waste management, the public transportation, and some housing as well. And this is good to know because we can, as we are the owner and control these things, we can change them as well. We don't have to rely on other people to do that. And that's the next part I'm going to talk about. It's the public transportation, which is the Wiener Linien and which is owned by the city of Vienna. And we are not as cycling friendly or as weatherproof as our friends from Netherlands. So there are a lot of cyclists in Vienna, and the number is growing because of COVID as well. But Vienna relies on the public transportation as the eco-mobility backbone, and 40% of the Viennese people, 40% of the ways people travel here in Vienna are by public transportation. We also invest a lot right now, again, into our public transportation system. We are currently investing 2 billion euros to build a new metro line and to prolong another one. And we are also building 5 new tram lines. So there's a lot of investment going there because Vienna decided that public transportation is the way to move around in this city. And we also want people to use it. This is why the annual season pass is only €1 per day. And it's compared to other cities, it's pretty cheap because we want to invite and motivate our inhabitants to use the public transportation system. Another precondition in Vienna is that as it has a long history of social democratic politics, is that we have affordable housing, and the city of Vienna owns a lot of housing or subsidizes it. So more than half of the inhabitants of Vienna live in a home that is either entirely or partly financed by the city of Vienna, which also means that the rent free is limited. So in the Gemeindebau, which we call it, the rent is 7.5 euros per square meter. And as Vienna owns a lot of housing, it's also hard for private investors to charge a lot more for rent because Vienna lowers the prices on the housing market. And this is why also in this mixed quarter districts, for example, we try to have a social standard, and there are no banlieues like in Paris, for example, because we try to have a social stability all over Vienna, and poor people or not as financially strong people don't live in the outer districts, but everywhere because the rent is not high in the center and low in the outer districts, but it's mixed. With these conditions also come challenges, and I don't want to talk about the challenges a lot because you already mentioned them earlier, and we have to face them all, and they were also mentioned before in the other presentations. I want to add a fifth challenge, though, in this slide, and this is time, because time is pressing. We don't have a lot of it. We have to transform our cities to become smarter and more sustainable. And we don't have a lot of time to do that because it's, as I said, already pressing. And Vienna, therefore, decided, I think it was last year, that we want to become CO2 neutral by 2040, which is in 19 years already. And this is why we are trying our best to become even stricter and to try to get our project through more quicker. And our response to all these challenges is our framework strategy. We have a smart city framework strategy, which was initiated in 2011 and published in 2014, then updated in 2019. And now, again, it is being updated, and the next version of it will come out in December. And this is why I already mentioned time. We see that we do have very ambitious goals, but they are not enough, and we have to be quicker and install our projects more quicker and implement our strategy quicker. And this is why we are already trying to turn the little screws and try to become even more ambitious. So the goal of our framework strategy has always been to maintain the high quality of life for everyone in the city through social and technical innovation in all areas, while maximizing conservation of resources. So as you can see, we have 3 areas we focus on. And for us, it's not the most important. It's a very holistic view of all of the strategy. We don't focus on digitalization, for example. We want to see everything. And this framework strategy guides the entire city to this more sustainable transformation. And what's also special about it is that it is binding. So the city council agreed that this goals have to be achieved, and there's also a lot of political commitments to achieve these goals. So we don't only have one framework strategy, but also a lot of sectoral strategies beneath it, and they contribute and align with this framework I mentioned earlier. So as you can see here, we have also a paper about digitalization or health or urban development, and all these papers and projects who align with these papers then again align with the framework strategy. And as I already mentioned before, this is now the second version, and the third one is coming out soon. And because we have 66 goals within our framework strategy, meta goals, and then again, smaller goals beneath it. And as I already mentioned, as you can see here, we got stricter last time, and now we are even more stricter because we want to reach our CO2 neutrality by 2040. And when you have goals, you also have to measure them and see how the progress works. This is why we also have a monitoring process where we try to see how far we got in which area and where we have to put more effort in, or where we are already pretty good and don't have to emphasize that much. And as you can see here in this colorful slide, is that there are a lot of topics that we try to tackle with our framework. And as it is a complex matter, there are no easy solutions. So you have here our quality of life, the conservation of resources, and the social and technical innovation part. And these all intertwine together. There are a lot of interrelations, and everything is connected. And as soon as you see the goals, you can also see that some goals interfere with others. So we have a lot of target conflicts as well. And this is why the monitoring is so important, and this is why governance is really important. So you have to sit down with people who decide and who know what to do and talk about different target conflicts. For example, we say we need digitalization, it's a new thing, and it is important to use these tools in a certain way to be smarter and more sustainable. But at the same time, here in Austria, it also comes together with privacy and data security issues. If you want to install a camera somewhere to see public traffic and where people go, you always have to keep in mind that it's a privacy issue, because you cannot just film people and then you have legal problems. And this is, for example, easier in Asia, where you can do these things, but here in Europe, it's not as easy. And you have to take this into account. Or, for example, we want our economy to grow, but at the same time, we have to see that our resources are being conserved. And yes, also with housing, for example, you have, if you want housing to be sustainable and the energy has to come from new resources, you also have to keep in mind that people have to still afford it. So this is also here social inclusion. And I can see it right now, I think it's down there. Energy here. So it's always hard to see this complex system and at the same time find target conflict and balance them out. And this is only possible by cooperation, a lot of talking, but also with a lot of doing. So that's the next step. We, as I already mentioned, we want to implement the projects we have and the strategy we have. We don't have a lot of time for it, but it still has to be thought of as well. So we want to see the social impacts and benefits. We want to keep in mind the ecological footprint. We also want a new innovation, a new technology, but we have to keep in mind that it's not necessary to have a new technology without a purpose. So all these three things have to go together. And the fourth one is, if you have the perfect solution, you still have to be able to afford it, and it has to make economic sense. So it's a pretty complicated challenge we have in front of us, but everything is dealing with it. So yes, this is how Vienna tries to do it and tries to see it. We have a very holistic approach, as I already said, and this is what makes it maybe a little bit harder, but at the same time, we have to keep everything in mind because, as I already told you here, everything works together in some way. I have also this short slide for you, which also shows that time is pressing, because I know it's not entirely comparable, but as you can see here, it took the telephone, 50 years to reach 5 million users. And Pokemon Go, it only took 17 days to reach 5 million users. So it provides a good look at how fast things are evolving and how fast the world is moving right now. And we have to adapt to it and do something because, as I already said, time is pressing, and we have to keep in mind that we have to implement projects and not only talk about them. And as the lady from Sweden said, it's also necessary to make mistakes and to fail and to do it better next time. So don't be afraid to try something out, and if it doesn't work, you still have learnings from it. And this is why I want to share some projects with you, which might be interesting. And the first one we have here is the Aspen Smart City research. Aspen Smart City is a new development area here in Vienna. It started 10 years ago, and there was nothing there, and now there's a small city within a city, so we have a lot of housing, a lot of people living there. And there was it is a joint venture with Siemens. So the city of Vienna and Siemens got together and used this new area to test out new things. So new energy solutions and new energy solutions with real life households, buildings, and an energy grid. And in these live simulations, we could generate data and learn from the findings we found here. But what I want to focus on with this project is that when we did this, my colleague told me, because I wasn't there, that in the first meeting, some officials of the city of Vienna came to the meeting to talk to Siemens about how to do it, and Siemens came with 10 lawyers. So it's important when you work together with the business world and you need them to be able to get the innovation and digitalization into your city, you have to work together with businesses. But at the same time, you have to keep in mind that you don't have the innovation inside of your city maybe, but you have to have the legal competence. So when Siemens comes with 10 lawyers, you have to have as many too, because it's all about intellectual property rights. And if a company uses your city as a test bed to test out things and maybe then sell them to other cities, you have to be sure that it's a win-win situation and that you own some of the intellectual property rights as well. And I have one other example of our projects as well, because it fits to the one with the digitalization and to take everyone with you. It's very important for Vienna to include every citizen in all these projects. So when we talk about digitalization, we also have to talk about elderly people who are not digital natives and who have to be taken in account as well. So as already mentioned in the South African presentation, here the problem is that elderly people don't know about digitalization, and we tried to, in a project, to equip them with smart technology. And for example, they got a watch which measured their blood pressure. They got some smart gadgets in the home, and we told them what they can do with them, and they tried them out. And one learning of this digitalization project was that elderly people want to be involved when you are trying to do something for them. But at the same time, one thing we learned is that it's good that the doctors can see the results from the watch, for example. So the doctor gets the data from the blood pressure, for example, and actually these elderly people didn't have to go to the doctor's office because the doctor already had all the data. But elderly people want to go to the doctor's office and they want to sit in the living room and see other people because often they are alone, they don't have a lot of social interaction. And one of the major social interactions in their lives is going to the doctor. So as I already mentioned before, it's nice to have digital gadgets and technology, but at the same time, you have to keep in mind that you are working with people and people have also different needs and they have to be considered. And I think that's about it. We have a lot of other projects as well. They are on our website. You can find them here or I'll post a link in the chat as well. And that's it from my side. Köszönöm.
Köszönöm. Angela, thank you very much for your presentation. I think Vienna has done a lot to be the smartest city, at least in Central Europe. And I wish that we could learn from you a lot, and we can try to make our connection closer to Vienna and Urban Innovation Vienna as well. Thank you very much for your cooperation.
With pleasure.
I turn to Hungarian now because this is the closing section.
So, ladies and gentlemen, in front of the screens, the 3.5 hours have passed as if nothing had happened, just like a second. And I believe that we've received so much information that is even difficult to process at first. And if you agree, there is a homepage on SMART13.hu, and we share all the presentations there. And the local council will, I think, publish it on a YouTube page. And please do follow us, and maybe you should watch the presentations again. And based on the presentations, I'm sure you can get even more information in the future. However, it is important to mention that what we want to do is that next year we want to start a community building project, mainly obviously focusing on District 13. However, obviously Smart City cannot stop at the borders of the district. But anyway, we want to implement some sort of a cooperation within Budapest. And I believe that District 13 is pioneering in this area. Also, one of our mission is that we want to become the smartest district in Budapest. And what we can see is that there is an interest for this issue. In the morning, when we were preparing for the conference, we just took a look, the 10 minutes before start, 50 or 60 people were already signed in. So clearly there is an interest, there is a need for innovation and knowledge. So if you just check the smartcity.13.hu, that would be very important. Thank you very much for your participation. I would like to thank the representatives of the embassies, and of course all the speakers for their very important participation. Thank you very much and take care.